most of the box arts that we're going to talk about today, the artists end up or have been identified. It's known who they are, whether because they're painted pieces that are signed or they're inked and the originals have, are in collectors' hands or around. But this is one of the very early ones. Didn't leverage comic book artists, as far as I know. Like we don't. I don't think
Yeah.
Dan. We don't know who did this one, do we?
No, and I agree. That's very likely, somebody hired via Parker Brothers as opposed to a comic artist, which is what we see for everything later.
But
So,
Marvel would have had to sign off on this, right, Dan? Like,
yeah. Of course, of course. I think that's true for any licensing arrangement. They're not going to let you represent their character in a way that they aren't happy with because that damages their brand and their IP. So, of course, there's going to be a sign off.
But you know what gets interesting about that, Ibrahim? If we, I think where I'd like to go here is go into some of the NES ones, because as we talk about licensing, it's really peculiar, right? Where these games license the property, but with that didn't really get access to the art. Like is my take, right? So you look at, like, we've talked about the Wolverine NES, right? And so this is a redraw or a re-ink of one of the comic covers, right? And
issue
it
42,
begs the question, like, why
27,
didn't
I think.
27,
Wolverine
so.
27, yeah.
right? It consistently begs the question, why didn't they just have years and years of fantastic cover art potentially available to them to reuse on these games, or to crop or manipulate or do what they want? And they're doing re-inks, or they're commissioning new art, or they're slapping shit together.
Yeah, well, that's on the NES titles. Like, I think they are recycling a fair bit, and we can go through that. But SNES and forward, like, I had the exact same conclusion. Like, it's kind of odd that they didn't reuse, but maybe they just wanted fresh art on the box. I mean, if we go back to the NES images for a second, Ibrahim, like Wolverine, we've talked about that's essentially the Wolverine 27 cover, although for some reason they had Scott Williams re-ink Jim Lee's pencils, because if you look at the ink lines, they don't match up. It's not the same image, and that's peculiar when you already had a perfectly ready Wolverine 27. But if you look at the Punisher there, for example, that is a straight reproduction of the Punisher War Journal 8 cover, so that is a pure reuse.
Yeah.
If we go back to Silver Surfer, that is a pure reuse of the Silver Surfer graphic novel by Joe Jusko, the cover of that.
And like I said, I'd say this is probably my favorite of the NES.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. It's an awesome painting. And actually, the original sold at one point on Comic Link. God, probably 8-9 years ago now. Probably 10 years ago.
If only Comic Link had an archive of their sales.
I know, right? I mean, it wasn't like at the time. I think it was $8,000 or $9,000, which 10 years ago was more than I had lying around for it. But boy, I'd like to pay that for it now. It's a great image. Spider-Man, if we go to that for a second, since we've been talking Spider-Man, we've been talking comics. The characters inside the eyes are from an Eric Larson Spider-Man cover, and the figure was probably taken from somewhere too, but I don't know the exact panel. The one that bugs me is the X-Men, because that looks like a comic.
Well, hang on. Stay on this one, only because I just want to say I really like this one. Like,
yeah, it's cool.
Like I like the Joe Jusko as a beautiful painted piece, but among like the LJ uncovers, which I think are pretty mediocre, whether the Punisher one, the reproduction quality is dog shit. Like you really have to study and say, yes, I can confirm this is the same image, but it reproduced so poorly from what it looked like on the comic cover to how it came on the box that it looks bad.
Maybe that's why they redrew the Wolverine. Maybe they would have had the same issue.
Maybe. I mean, if you're giving them the benefit of the doubt, I had the perception that LJN was pretty cheap. Like, however you interpret that as a final result. But I think this one came out. Like, this looks sharp. This looks like it would be an attractive box on the cover. Like, this is what I think I would have expected across the board for early Marvel covers of we've got this great catalog, like let's pick vibrant images and use them to sell the games. I think I forget, you were gonna maybe go to X-Men, but that
Yeah, it
cap,
just always bugged me that I could never place that image because the style looks like
it's a
I
hodgepodge. Like I'm pretty sure these are. I think. Well, I haven't. There is a. I could be confusing things, right? There's an arcade game that's X-Men that there's 5 or 6 or 8 characters, and each of them are drawn by a different artist, right? So like they just took it from somewhere, licensing art, covers, other things, and mashed it together. I guess that was kind of my presumption for this one as well, that they came from different places.
it
What,
could
each
be.
character, do you mean? Each character came from a different place?
Yeah.
It could
Okay.
be. I mean, yeah, it's so
It,
hard to say. Like the Storm in particular, every time I look at Storm, like I don't know, it looks like I want to say it looks like the second run Cockrum issues, but I don't know. There's something about it I can't put my finger on, and maybe you're right. Maybe it's because it's a hodgepodge. I don't know, but that one bugs me. But yeah, the point I guess being that a lot of the NES. So if that's what this is, then this is another recycle. And I guess in the NES era, I guess these are all LJN games, aren't they? They must have had the Marvel license kind of exclusively. No, Silver Surfer's Arcadia, so it is a mix. I think there's one other. Oh, Captain America too for NES. I was never able to put my fingers on that, but that looks familiar too. So, that is something that I could definitely see being a hodgepodge because the characters don't even really seem to go together.
Oh, I hate
do
that
we
If we
have
one.
that
have,
on here?
It's up toward the top
it's
somewhere.
it's
Oh,
in there somewhere. Yeah,
It's
they're on the left,
second
Ibrahim, on
row
the
on
oh
the
yeah,
left.
yeah,
left.
yeah, yeah,
It's
You see,
terrible.
yeah, like the logos just
yeah.
slapped into the bottom corner, and then the
The
characters
way
are
it's
all
cut.
look a different way. Yeah, somebody. It just looks like somebody spent 10 minutes on that.
I was trying to find. I thought for the Uncanny X-Men NES box art that someone had posted something in the Facebook group. I just remember a pink background,
Well, yeah,
but it
that was the color art. I think he had the color art and maybe the mechanical lines, but I could be wrong. I think
yeah,
that was
and
Reese.
I think so. I mean that sounds right to me, and I searched Uncanny, but I couldn't pull it up. But
So I mean, so
Yeah.
that's early. That's sort of early on when they're reusing comic art to for box art, but that sort of changed down the line.
Right, yeah,
yeah,
we get into SNES, and then now we're using kind of this mix, right? We've got some that are line art based, so like that Spider-Man X-Men on the bottom right, line art based, and so in by comic artists in the comic book style, so you could see that that's kind of done up. Like just looking at it, yeah, I mean, there's the original. You could just tell. I used to own that. That's John Romita. You could see it's signed bottom left there, and you can also tell that they've made him work outside his style. Like that's not his normal style, really. They've made him use the kind of '90s Spider-Man look that was heavily influenced by McFarlane. But we've got a mix of these, and then we've got a mix of full painted covers by Fabry and Steacy and DeVries and so on. Or Fabry, you said, Ibrahim.
Yes,
Fabry, Glenn
favorite.
Fabry. Which are terrific, right? Those are really, my favorites. And I know in talking beforehand, probably everybody's favorites.
yeah.
Really,
The one that all three of us had was the Incredible Hulk. I think all three of us had that
yeah,
on our short list
Yeah,
of favorites, and I think
yeah.
like I'd say having gone through all these, hands down, I'd probably put this as my favorite. Pre 2000 Marvel cover, Marvel box art.
It, and it's amazing because there's so little happening on the
Yeah.
box. It's just a headshot, but it draws all of us in because just all the little flexion of the facial muscles and everything, and you just know he's about to go nuts, and that's hard to convey, right? Like it's an easy concept, like let's have Hulk angry on a box from the neck up, but to pull that off like convincingly like that, where it just draws you in, like it's a tremendously well done piece.
Like
I think for
his
me,
level of
his eyes
Yeah,
dropping, and
the
that
whole area
filter.
around his
Oh, it's
eyes, the
crazy.
whole
Yeah,
area, yeah, the bridge of the or the part between the eyes and
yeah.
everything as well.
Yeah, I think that his style of realism worked perfectly for this image. Um, the other thing that I think will a theme I'll come back to as we're talking about some of this box art, some of these box arts are, I think, overwhelmingly the box arts that focused on a single character, I think were more successful as images than the ones that tried to focus on lots of different characters and those kind of contrived scenes. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
that put the Hulk on full display. Even if you knew nothing about the Hulk, you pick up anger, rage. He's formidable. He's strong. Like you can pick so much up from the image, even if you had no baseline whatsoever for the character. Which I don't know. I really really like the image,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think
and
it's
that's go ahead.
and with the Fabries. I mean, there's one we'll talk about later, but they're they're kind of unaccounted for, right? I mean, there's one that Adam has and has shown at some of his events at CCAG. There's another one that's turned up recently because the Hulk is maybe I'm mentally miscounting. So the Hulk is not accounted for, and neither is
Right,
separation anxiety.
right.
Um, and this one, separation anxiety, is as I understand it, four separate illustrations.
Yeah, which is kind of a bummer, right? Because it's so beautiful. Like it'd be my favorite of all of them. But yeah, my understanding is all four of those figures are on separate boards. I think, yeah, I can't remember how that was arrived at. Maybe because of the fact that the characters are in different spatial relationships to each other on different versions of the boxes, so they must have been
Yeah,
pulled out.
I know Jeremy Buzash was able to confirm it either with
Yeah,
a Marvel
maybe with
contact
the
or with
artist.
Fabry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, unfortunately,
none of the four pieces ever sort of surfaced.
well, that's the sort of thing that Fabry would have sold for,
Hmm.
some small three-figure sum back in the 90s.
Yeah. There was a
There were
story.
little spot illustrations that nobody cared about at the time.
There was a story I heard, and I hope I'm not misremembering because, and this could be a mediocre story because I don't have the details right. But what I remember being told was, Fabry at the end of a convention needing to have train fare to get back home, and sold not this one, but sold whether it was one of the other Marvel pieces or just that nature of selling art as you make it make ends meet, right? And so something like this gets sold very cheaply to get train fare back home, and then it's kind of lost to the wind. Um,
It's probably true of a lot of the ones that are unaccounted for when it comes to Marvel because like we said, they were all known artists for the most part, and they were all selling at conventions from the time the pieces were made. So it's not like with the game art where nobody even knew their names until 20 years later, and so the originals had kind of stayed with them for a while. These were cast to the wind immediately. We saw that with Sirocco, right? Like, there's a bunch of Siroccos, him being a comic artist as well, that were cast to the winds, and one of them, eventually popped back up after Heritage kind of solicited their client base to see if anybody had them in Bionic Commando. But yeah, I mean, a lot of those were sold for $200 in the 90s, and I'm sure the same is true of a number of these pieces here.
But
So
but what's good is, being this is from the world of comics, whoever has these pieces, it's not like a sort of unknown game piece that could be chucked away or
yeah,
thrown
they
away
didn't throw
or
them
given
out
away.
for sure.
So it's with somebody that knows this is for the world of Marvel. I mean, you would be you'd have to be brain dead not to know this is a Marvel piece. So it's something that hopefully over the years might resurface and should resurface over time.
Yeah,
Well,
but
and that ties into our story about the one Fabry that came up recently. And so I don't know if now is the time for the story or not, but I mean that's exactly what happened, right? Somebody had that for sale, had it for sale really primarily as a comic book piece, without much thought or care to the video game aspect, and really it's worth more to the video game collector than the comic collector, because the comic collector that's not into video games doesn't necessarily want something outside of comics, whereas to the game collector that kind of likes comics, it's like, oh wow, because there isn't a lot of those, right? So there isn't a lot of opportunities to pick something up along those lines.
And before we sort of continue on that, they're the comic book collectors, the comic original artwork collectors. They would have been they're naturally a lot older than us. Not a lot.
Well, speak for yourself.
Sorry. A little bit older than us, So,
actually, this is exactly what happened with the Panosian Spider-Man ad piece that just sold too.
Yeah,
guy bought it as a as a comic piece, just like the image of Spider. Maybe we can pull that up. He just liked the image of Spider-Man, and it's up top, Ibrahim.
Right there.
Yeah, the black and white, middle right,
down,
middle right. The black and white.
Oh,
black
sorry.
Yeah.
But this would have been a sort of comic collector, He bought this piece early on as a Spider-Man, and us video game art collectors, we were far too young to buy this stuff, but it's through these comic original artwork collectors that now it's sort of passing on to us. So
right. Well, yeah, he had seen some discussion, I think, of potential values of certain game-related pieces, and he literally thought to himself, "Wait, I've got one of those." Posted it. Asked for value opinions. Most of them came in right around what it sold for. Like people were telling him that it was worth, 4 or 5K, and it sold for $47.50, so it was spot on. And so he was probably very happy to get that, because as just a random Spider-Man piece, probably not worth that. So that's an exact example, right? Whereas as some of these guys who bought some of this stuff just as random comic pieces, and in fact probably discounted actually comic pieces because they weren't for a comic, as they start to find out that there might be a value along another dimension, we might see more of these pop up. And to your point, Sanford, about the cast of character pieces not looking as good, like what a prime example. You've got this big huge Spider-Man on the right hand side, looks great, and then you've got everybody else, like 10 other characters jammed into a lower quadrant, right?
Well, what worked really well for this one though is that because it was an ad piece, they use it different ways, right? Sometimes it was the double page ad, sometimes they did just the Spider-Man, right?
Yep.
Gave them a little more versatility. So at least they designed it like, I guess, like I do like how it guides my eyes, right? I'll start from the top left, go down the one web, hit Spider-Man, follow the other webs, the characters. Like it's.
Oh, I like the piece, but it illustrates your point that, when you had that many characters to illustrate on one board is tougher to do.
Yeah. And I think what helps across the Spider-Man games is even as you introduce other characters, it's always clear that Spider-Man is the focus, right? So it might introduce an enemy or two or an additional character, but like it's always been clear to me like Spider-Man is the focus. I mean that's my take, right? So like go to now. I think the Bagley Super Famicom one maybe is an exception to that. There's a lot going on. But
just on this, do we know who bought it? Do we know if it's a original video game art collector or a comic guy? Do we know?
Actually, I do know who bought it.
Is it more a game guy or a comic?
I would say more comic with an interest in game art, but hasn't found the sort of piece he's looking for at the price he's looking for yet.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, for me, it's, I'm used to seeing fully illustrated pieces, painted pieces.
Yeah.
So as a, art collector, but in the space of video games, that's what I want to see. That's what I'd like out of a Spider-Man. Whereas the comic guys, they're used to everything being in pretty much black and white and then ink later on. So it's the norm. But for me and the majority of video game art collectors, a piece like this, while it is appealing, it doesn't have that final
Well,
touch.
let's get into that, right? Let's
Yeah,
get into that because
yeah,
that is a huge thing. Like, it's funny in comic art collecting, painted pieces are kind of poo pooed on, right? Because it's like color, and then there's so much to look at because it's a black and white hobby, so people want black and white pieces that fit in with their other black and white
yeah,
pieces and slide into their portfolios
Yep.
that are comic page dimensions, and so everything kind of fits. And with us on the game art side, like, we're so used to having painted pieces that some of us see black and white pieces and we're like, black and white, ew, right? It's a total
Yeah.
flip of the script, and I think it used to sort of I used to not be able to wrap my head around that, but I really think it is ultimately just what you're used to and what the hobby's expectations are and what most of the art is. Like, if you look at Magic the Gathering stuff, I think you'd have the same reaction there. Everybody's used to color. If you had a black and white piece, I'm not sure people would love it there either, right?
Yeah.
It's just
And
what
it
the hobby's
happens
into.
in the last 5-6 years, right? There have been a number of Magic has been expanding and who they're hiring as artists, the different IPs that they're bringing in. And so you are seeing black and white artists do work. The originals are black and white and then they get digitally colored. And those
Hmm.
pieces, of course, sell for much less than the painted pieces from the fantasy artists who are now working, used to be what, not 4x6, not 5x7, but, an 8x11 sheet of page or
Oh,
paper or
at the,
smaller
the
at the
very
very
early
beginning.
ones were 5.7, five
Okay.
by
Yeah.
seven. There
And
was the
that
size
was
of an NES box
yep.
was the
And
original.
I had heard that was because of a scanner limitation. Like, where they only had a scanner that could do that size, so everyone had to paint that size. Is what I heard for Alpha.
I,
Um,
I think it was. I'm sure that's part of it, and then I think it was also partly cost because they were only paying those guys. I forget $200-$400 a painting. That's it.
yeah. But yeah, we all gravitate. I think the original video game art hobby gravitating towards painted pieces, right? Because that's the bulk. But I will say, like, I am coming around to some black and white pieces. But I think what I expect is have a higher expectation for me to like a piece. Like, if it's like a single character, almost spot image, very simple lines. Um, I'm not captivated, right? Where if you have more of like a full scene in greater detail, or I guess I'm learning to appreciate better inking or better line work. So it's not that you need to pack it with detail; it's you need to, like, choose your detail in a good way. I'm not being coherent about it, but
Yeah.
like, I'm learning to
Well,
appreciate some of those pieces a little more.
like that Spider-Man X-Men piece that we just looked at, that ad piece, like, that's a successful piece. That's a nice looking piece. It's a nice balance between detail and empty space and whatever. But yeah, like, if I have to choose, I'm gonna take one of these Fabry pieces 10 times out of 10 over an inked piece. That's really the reason I sold that Ramita, the Spider-Man X-Men
and
SNES
that was a
piece.
really nice one. Like, as they go, that's, I've put this as one of my favorites. It's a nice piece. It's
And when I owned it, I couldn't give two shits about it because I was like, black and
You
white.
wanted it fully painted.
It just didn't appeal, and but these sorts of pieces definitely do have a market. I think they do appeal very much to the person that's more comic collector than game collector, but likes games. Someone that is maybe just looking to dip their toe in, like the person that we just described that purchased the ad piece. So, like Sanford said, like, there's a place for them. I appreciate them to a degree, but yeah, I have a higher bar for them as well. But it's I don't know that the market overall, like it's interesting to think. Does the market have a preference for one or the other?
Which market are we talking? Video game art market or
Just
just in general?
you slap it on Heritage in a video game sale.
Yeah,
Which one's going to do better? I
maybe
think
unbiased, painted.
I think the painted would too, but I think there'd be a good market for the black and white stuff as well, because at the end of the day, like, people associate with the IP. The IP has been popular as hell the last 20, 30 years, and they just want a piece of a game that has the IP linked to it.
So I'll share one story that I kind of thought about bringing the piece, but I have it in a box. But I was surprised. I mean, I won a piece on Heritage within the last 6 months or a year. This was a Ultimate Marvel versus Capcom 3. So this is a I think PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4 era title. This is the cover art for a pack-in comic that maybe doubled as an instruction manual, came in with certain physical copies of the game. I think most copies of Ultimate Marvel versus Capcom, I think, were sold digitally, so a smaller number that got physical prints that then would have had this comic packed in, just the cover, to the manual. And this was, I really like the piece, right? It's got a lot of recognizable Marvel characters, Capcom characters, good composition, published on the cover of an interior thing. And I won it for just a little over $2,000. And so this is a very recent sale, and maybe it was in a comic auction, and maybe people missed it, maybe I valued it more than others, but I thought for the number of characters and the detail and how it looked and the properties, both Capcom and Marvel, I thought it undersold, and I'm very happy that I ended up with it. And maybe it's just I don't know, I'm curious for your guys' thoughts, but
I think the comic art buyer values things differently than we do. Like, there's a much higher placement on sort of the name of the artist.
yep.
For us, it's more about what game was it on, what image was it, what this, that, all the other things we kind of look at. Like, comic art kind of starts with the artist's name.
Yeah.
So if
and
it's
this was Geraldo Sandoval, right? He's not
exactly,
he's not, maybe not a household name for many.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I think that's why, but I think it's a good buy because it's you know, like you said, it's Marvel, it's Capcom, and how many recent titles along those lines even have anything associated with them at all? So, good buy on your part, but at the same time, I'm not surprised that the comic people watching the auction would limit the value of it to a certain degree.
Yeah. But I have something Marvel. I also have something Capcom, right? And
There you go.
those start to
Yeah, it's a
look at
good win.
buckets that are kind of hard to get. And I think some of that is, if you want a Spider-Man comic piece, you've got decades of covers, you've got decades of interiors. If you want a Spider-Man video game piece, Dan said earlier, there's about 15 box arts that were done. But as you look at some of these Game Boy Spider-Mans, those are some of the ones that are kind of actually, as far as I know, unidentified, right? That trio of Spider-Man box arts for Game Boy. And so there's
And
a
they
couple
that first one looks like it would have been cut from somewhere. These other ones look like we should know the artist. Like,
yeah.
it bugs me, but I just I don't know.
I hate that particular one, the Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, I don't like
And
them either. Two
and
or
maybe
three.
and maybe this is just looking from like when they would choose a villain that like hadn't gotten popularized in following years. I have no idea who that character is.
Yeah.
And maybe that was the villain at the moment. I don't know, but it
I
seems like
don't
a
think
weird
so, man.
choice,
I
right?
don't think so.
Like, why Invasion of the Spider Slayers, right? I don't know.
It must have been whatever worked with the game at the time, I guess. But yeah, it's a bit of an odd choice. There, as we talked about kind of off air, there's a lot of weird stuff going on at Marvel around this time. I mean, this is around the time that Marvel goes bankrupt. There's a big spec boom in comics, and then a huge bust afterwards. And even conventions that I used to go to, because I used to go to comic book conventions and buy back issues, vintage stuff at the time. It went from you couldn't move around in the convention elbow to elbow, people ahead of you to look at stuff on the table. Somebody drops a stink bomb and you're looking around wondering who did it, because there's so many people you can't tell, for just being packed in like sardines to the place being empty and depressing. So there was a lot going on. So maybe some of their controls and processes around it weren't as tight in an era where they're barely scraping by and restructuring. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so at the beginning, Ibrahim, you said something like, "Well, hey, Marvel still has to sign off on that image, right?"
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, of course, but I guess I could see there being a balance of, hey, we need money coming in. If that's a shitty game, if it's mediocre representation on the box, if that's still money coming in, I'm curious how much that was a factor. For certain games, certain timing, or maybe it just didn't matter. I don't know.
Who knows? And then you look at the Fabrys, and they're so awesome, right? Like there's that Captain America on the left there. Sorry.
Yeah. Of course,
yeah.
He has to go for the SNES. He can't open the game.
Yeah. Being a SNES fan, of course, right? And we talked about the fact that this is one that Adam Harvey has and has shown a few times, and the image is awesome, right? And then you look at the Genesis one. Sorry, Sanford. Sorry, buddy. But you look at the Genesis one, and I didn't even notice until we started preparing for this episode. On the very right, Ibrahim, very right, up top, very right, up top, very right. There you go. Yeah.
Nope.
Right there.
There you go.
So it is the exact same scene, you guys. You can see Captain America's in the same pose. It's the same characters. You've got the Red Skull and the looming in the background. It is the exact same scene. It's just one's done way better than the other. And, this is one that's done by a comic book artist.
Butch Geis, and he passed away this year.
And he was a really good, I liked, Jackson, I guess was his first name, went by Butch. I like Jackson Butch Geis, or Guice, or however you said his name, a lot. But I mean, when you compare the two, there's no comparison to me. And I don't know if Butch was looking at Fabry's art or Fabry was looking at Butch's art, but clearly they got the memo on, they had to compose, the image the same way, but one just blows the other one completely out of the water. I wouldn't have even known they were the same until we prepped for this. Did you guys ever clue into that before?
Well, I was just going to ask, did these come out at the same time? Because, if they're both on a shelf.
I didn't check.
So
I didn't check.
I do know that the Genesis one through Data East was put together by Beeline, Dan. Right. And
okay.
I know that there was a Beeline artist who took a first run at the Captain America and the Avengers image that was rejected and not used. And so I don't know if you you have that image get worked on and not used. Fabry does his, and then they need something quick for Genesis. And then I'm just guessing as we're talking here, right, that you then copy the Fabry composition in the comic style.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm on Wiki now. So it released on this Genesis first, and then it was released on Super Nintendo, Game Boy, Game Gear later on. In
is the Genesis almost like a black box? It's an earlier title, right? What's the? It's not the black grid, but what is the release date on the Genesis? There, Ibrahim.
It doesn't say the actual day.
Okay, never mind.
October 91.
Yeah, relatively early for Genesis, right?
Yeah. It's a pink background on that one.
I don't think I don't think the SNES comes out to what, 94 or something? 93, 94? Anyway, we've answered the question. It's clearly the Genesis one first.
So what I would say,
Fabry probably looked at that and
Now I think the Fabry looks fantastic. I would be very curious to see what the original for the Genesis one looks like. I think it'd be hard pressed to be as wowed seeing the original, but I bet
there's no chance. I mean, even the published boxes, it's not even close.
but published box is a terrible way to compare these things, right?
Yes,
We talked
but
a
what are
little
you
bit
going to
about,
get?
like,
You're gonna get a 10x15 ink drawing. It might look better,
yeah,
but come on.
yeah.
I mean, we know what the original for the Fabry looks like. At least it's not hard to imagine what the black and white ink drawing for the Genesis looks like.
So one thing I will say with the painted pieces and the scale that really works for the Fabry is it's much more clear. It's much more clear visually that Captain America is the focus. In the Genesis one, it's a little flatter, and the characters appear the same size in some ways. That, like, my eyes don't immediately focus on Captain America. I'm seeing other characters at the same time. Whereas I look at the SNES box art, Captain America is right in the center. The colors and shading are done to make him pop a little more than everything else.
And so he should.
He should, right? And I think that's, like, as I was talking earlier about why I thought the Fabry Hulk image was so successful. It was a single character, focuses on the Hulk, his face only. I think same thing. This Captain America and the Avengers did a great job keeping it on Captain America.
Well, it's called Captain America and the Avengers, right?
But not all the other, like, okay, but look at that
afterthought. He should be front and center.
He should be, but go back to that terrible NES box.
Yeah,
right.
They're the same size, and they're all looking off in different directions, like it's a '90s album cover.
Right. No, not that one. It's way at the top, Ibrahim.
The Captain America.
Sorry,
right there.
And like he's in the center, but it's
like
none of them. This wasn't designed. This is reuse of comic or licensed art or something.
It's got to be a cut and paste. It's got to be a cut and paste. It's so everybody, like, look, Captain America's looking up and to the left. Hawkeye's looking one way. Iron Man's just flying overhead. Like, it's.
As we talk about it, I think this and the Genesis are probably the same game, right? They're probably both different ports of the arcade game.
Maybe.
They're both Data East.
Yeah, they're about the same time too.
All right, so as we get into our episode runtime here, do you want to get into the Fabry story?
Yeah, let's do that. Why don't you kick it off?
Sure. So we've talked a little bit about Fabry's work. We said, hey, we don't really know where the Incredible Hulk is. We know Adam owns the Captain America and the Avengers. The separation anxiety is 4 separate pieces that are whereabouts currently unknown. And so War of the Gems is one that surfaced within the last year or 2 years. I kind of lose track of time here, right?
Something like that.
And so this is one that turned up, and it was posted for sale on Facebook in one of the comic art groups. And comically enough, it wasn't, it was one of those groups where you're not allowed to post things for sale. So the post goes up, someone says, hey, I'm selling this piece. And, not long after that, their post is deleted because you're not allowed to sell things in some of these comic groups, right? They really want to take it away from the markets and the reselling and speculation, and just talking about your favorite comic artists, right? Whatever the focus is. So this piece comes up, someone's selling it, and I reach out and I send him a message. And I didn't think I was going to buy it. I didn't think that was how it was going to go, but I kind of wanted to say, hey, this is a pretty significant video game piece of art that you have. I actually, my first message recommended the guy to send it to Heritage. Right. Like, I kind of didn't want it to get scooped up and sold cheap. Right. And I kind of sent a message and I said, hey, but I'm still happy to make an offer. I just wanted to throw that out there for you. And turns out, right, that this comic art collector was selling it on behalf of, he owned it, but he had given the piece to his nephew, something kind of like that. Right. Or so he wanted to sell the art to buy his nephew like a motorbike, something like that. Right. And so it's kind of this. He had a certain number in mind that would get him what he wanted for the motorbike. And so I said, okay. I said, like, I think it's worth more in this, but here's what I'll offer. And he kind of came back and said, well, could you do a little more? And I said, okay, sure. And he agreed to it. But then we had to say, okay, how do you actually make this sale happen? And it turns out that the seller is in the UK. And this is where Ibrahim comes into it to help secure the piece.
Yeah, so I get a message from you, and it's, you're like, oh, I've made a deal with this guy. You were telling me, you're updating me as things were progressing. And immediately I said, well, let's get the deal done today. And it was already like 5 p.m. over here in the UK. Yeah. And I just said, I checked. I'm like, can you get his address? He gave me the address. I'm like, that's only 2 hours away. I'm like, tell him my friend can be there in like 2.5 hours or 3 hours. Can we get the deal done today? Because in my mind, I'm just like, other people are going to reach out. So I'm like, the quicker we get this over the line, the better.
Don't give away your trade secrets, buddy.
Luckily, the guy's like, yeah, cool. So I got his address, drove down there. And in my mind, I saved the picture of the box art in my phone. Because in my mind, all I sort of wanted to make sure and guarantee was I'm picking up the original. I'm not picking up a print or something like that, because I didn't want to mess up. Yeah. It's not my money that's being spent here. So yeah, sure enough, got over there, turned up, really nice guy. Went inside. The first second he shows me the artwork, no shadow of doubt in my mind. I'm like, yep, that's the original. It's just fully painted, glorious piece. And yeah, I just couldn't believe it. Money was exchanged. Piece, became Sanford's. A very nice guy, he's a big comic collector. He started showing me, his entire collection. But that was sort of my involvement in it, and sent it over to Sanford.
Yeah, and I kind of remember going back and forth, and it's where, like, Ibrahim, you sent me a picture of your ID, and I messaged it to the other guy to be like, hey, like, this is the guy who's coming. He's a real person. And like, there's that, like, eventually you two were connected directly, but it was just kind of this game of, hey, I've got a friend in the UK. He said you're outside of London. Okay, he's coming, right, and figuring it out. And but I think without your help, Ibrahim, right, if it had lingered an extra day or two, or figuring out, what's the best way for me being in the US to pay someone in the UK in the most efficient manner for him, or what worked, right? A couple days could have made a difference here, right? So I appreciate you being quick.
No, it was a pleasure to have it for a week here.
Yeah. And then I guess at the time, what you didn't know, Ibrahim, and Dan, this is where you come in.
Yeah, was that Sanford and I had actually bought it together. And so that left the situation where we kind of joint owned it, and rather than kind of ripping it in half and each keeping a half, we had to come up with some way of figuring out who would own it. And so Sanford was kind enough to work with, because you could probably tell Sanford, like, I coveted it, like I really wanted it. So we were able to figure out a deal where I gave Sanford a piece in exchange for his half interest in this piece. So both of you guys to thank for having it now. Wouldn't have without both of you. And so here's the original here. Does that show up? I can't really. I don't have the picture on.
Yeah.
So I just love it. I love the just the emotion on all the characters, like particularly the Hulk, like the way his jaws mismatched and his eyes are bugging out and the veins are everywhere, that even his toes and feet and everything. Everybody's so dynamic and so just
there's emotion, aggression.
Yeah, the aggression, that's it. Yeah. On Cap, on Wolverine, on the Hulk. And obviously you can't show much aggression on, the guy in the armor suit, but even still, we've done a bit of that.
The shadowing on Iron Man, it I don't know, it's weird. Well, he looks pissed off. His eyes too.
Like there's a bit of that, and he's shown maybe
Yeah,
muscle where he shouldn't, right?
yeah,
Because he's in a suit of armor. There wouldn't be muscles rippling under the armor, but nonetheless, he's shown that, and your eye kind of forgives it.
No, I will
So
say, like, as I, having it back up here on the screen, I'm like, ah, man, how did I let that one out of my hands?
Well,
But I enjoy.
I think what you should have done is cut the Hulk and kept the Hulk, and just be like, "I'll take the Hulk. You can take the rest."
Oh no,
yeah,
Dan, you can take the Hulk. I'll take the rest. I mean, I think all the characters are well done here,
Yeah,
right?
they're
And
amazing.
and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
notice the background is it's all gray. You see a bunch of little brown at the bottom things around, right? It's interesting seeing Fabry's work, and he just really,
hmm
to my eye, just slaps the colors down, right? And so, like, if you're used to the airbrushing that we have, you have these clean, perfect backgrounds, and you mask things off and you build. And here it's, I'm guessing, right, of just laying down the background, and then painting your layers on top of it.
yeah,
And so,
yeah,
and this one in particular, right, does have on the published box a different background, right, which I now come to understand. I think is Thanos, right? Those are
yeah,
his
yeah.
eyes, I think, in the background there.
yeah. You
Um,
could see it in the magazine ad.
mhm.
I hate the Thanos image, uh,
I
but
I
yeah,
don't like the I haven't seen the original, but like it looks weird in the different compositions, right? Whether it's a whether it's a Super Famicom box art or the ad where you like see them arranged differently, right? Because
yeah,
they're at different levels. But just the characters there looks they all look phenomenal. And
yeah.
so that's one, and kind of my own mea culpa as this transpired. Someone said to me, "Oh, did you hear about the did you see the War of the Gems piece that sold?" And my response was, "Oof, I know who picked it up." um and I kind of stayed silent on my own part. And so maybe they watched this, and now they have a bit of the story. So
And
I,
a
I
bit
didn't
of a
I didn't
chuckle.
lie. I did say I
Yeah.
know who picked it up, but I also omitted that I knew more.
yeah, yeah, yeah. On that front, there was
That's
another
wonderful.
collector
I
that
mean, again, that's a fully
recently
painted
found
piece. And
another
Dan, I mean, you
Fabry,
you you let go of
but
that,
it
but
wasn't a
I,
published one. And
that's going nowhere, I reckon.
yeah, we're not going to talk about it because it's not ours
No, no,
to talk about.
I'm saying you let go of this Spider-Man sort of
Yeah,
black and white, but now you've
yeah,
got a
yeah. That
fully
one I'm not.
painted.
That yeah, that one
That's
I
not
love.
going
Yeah,
anywhere. Yeah.
yeah. It's funny, isn't it? It's funny, isn't it? Like they're both SNES titles and whatever, but yeah, the one I didn't care about and the other one I covet. Um, yeah, there was an unreleased Fabry found recently, so
Oh
maybe we'll
yeah.
save that for another. Or I don't know if Sanford, what the owner is comfortable in us
I,
disclosing. I don't want to say much.
I imagine the owner will share it themselves soon enough, just
Let's leave it
knowing
at
their
that then.
tendencies, right? And
Mm.
it's also a beautiful piece.
Hmm.
It was, I don't remember if it would have been SNES or not. Maybe that kind
I
of
don't remember either. I
late
thought it was
period,
Genesis,
95,
maybe.
96. But another great Fabry painting for a game that was ultimately canceled. And so Fabry was still hired, did a good job. I'm pretty sure the Hulk is on there. I don't know. Hulk is a fun character, man. Ibrahim, if you scroll down somewhere here, there's a Hulk 2 unreleased image that maybe it's up. I don't know, somewhere in here.
I
And
remember
again,
seeing
what always stood out for me seeing this one, it's not in the album. That's okay.
it. Okay.
Um and like, it's an okay piece, but it does such a good job focusing on the Hulk.
Hmm.
And again, just anytime a piece can bring the focus to where you want the viewer to be, I think it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he looks a bit sort of polished up here,
Oh
not as sort of aggressive. Not,
no, I
he's
Not a
hate
lost
huge
that
his
fan
one.
of that
touch.
one.
No,
I
no,
hate
Yeah.
it. He just
too
looks
smooth.
like that part in
It's
the
a
hair.
Hair
It
and
just looks
yeah,
soft.
his teeth are
it's
clean and shiny. What's going on?
it's a fist and a face, that one. And I know what they're going for, I think. Like
Yeah,
Dale Keown got popular, joined the Hulk in kind of that mid '90s kind of time period, and they're going for Keown kind of look there, but
Right.
unsuccessfully.
Yeah, and I had the name of that one. I don't know, I posted on the Facebook group at some point, a couple of years ago. Like somewhere at the bottom there was a signature, and somebody was able to kind of figure it out. And but I wasn't too excited because it's not Fabry Hulk.
Yeah, yeah.
As we wrap up, any favorites for you guys that we didn't touch on?
Well, I mean, there's this one for me, and I didn't know until today. Um, I mean, it's a stunning piece. Let me go to does it
The
display best
published.
on the Genesis, doesn't it?
It's all the way top.
Yeah, this one. And it's a stunning piece. It's brilliant. All the characters, it's not like that they spent less time on them. They're all pretty good, Wolverine front and center, but all the X-Men are very, very nice. But what I wanted to say is I didn't know until today that it's a sort of full wraparound. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
it's a stunning piece, but it's just I didn't know of that sort of extra empty space, um, which is not too bad, but it's just I don't know.
It lopsides the image a little bit, but it's still cool.
Still very nice. Still
The
very nice.
owners on the group, and this is
Yeah.
another example of one where the original was owned by a comic collector, bought by another comic collector who's into games. So it kind of traded along that circuit.
And
Um,
and I can say, and this is a little bit guessing here, right? But like, I think if it weren't done in that wraparound manner, that it would be less affordable, less attainable. Like I think I imagine that's priced in a little bit. Um,
Don't get me
like
wrong, I'd still buy it. I'm just being snobbish. I'd
yeah,
still buy it.
no. Well, I think we saw it with the that Battle of Olympus for Dave McMacken that
yep,
sold on
Yeah.
eBay,
yep.
right? Beautiful, incredible image. I
Yeah.
love the dragon on that one. Always love the
Yeah.
NES box art, seeing it, and then you see the original, and it's wrapped around and a bunch of dead space. And
Yeah.
this, I think, this is a much finer. Like this still
Yeah,
presents
definitely.
on its own
Definitely.
very well,
Yeah.
but you can kind of see how it impacted the pricing on the McMacken.
Yeah, and for those unfamiliar with what we're talking about, the Battle of Olympus NES cover, there's only about maybe 20-25% of the board that's illustrated. The entire image that's on the box art is just shoved into one little quadrant, and the other three quadrants are empty. So it's an extreme example of this sort of lopsided image. It
Yeah.
still went for, I don't know, 10, 11, 12,000 on eBay, something like that.
Yeah. Dan,
I feel like we haven't talked about the Ken Stacy stuff enough.
yeah,
And we haven't gotten into the fighting game stuff at all either.
Okay,
we
where'd you
can
go
go
for
for
that?
days. I'll be let's give Stacy a moment before we wrap. We're gonna
Let's
have to
do
go
that.
part two. I think Ken Stacy's a great painter. He did a lot of the X-Men stuff, most of the Game Gear. He did Genesis, X-Men 2 Clone Wars, very well
Bring up
regarded game.
bring up one of them. Bring up Mojo's World or something, or Game Master's Legacy,
I think we
either
have
one.
is the original one.
There's not the actually
Is
here,
it
top
this?
right corner.
Is
Yeah.
a better one? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is X-Men and Mojo World. This is painted by Ken Stacy, and no, I like his airbrushing, his colors. I guess that's some of it, right? When you look at Fabry, when you look at Dave DeVries, they were painting traditionally, right? And whereas Ken Stacy was doing the airbrushing, so visually that kind of difference between them, but um, I think just Stacy's really talented. I kind of wish they'd given him more, and
Mm-hmm.
some of his images didn't really reproduce that well in the box, whether they add extra backgrounds or text or other things.
I agree 100%. And you know what? I think that other comic, like, He's a known name in comics, but not like a giant name. But I think if you asked other comic professionals, they'd agree. Like when you look at, at this time, the biggest artist in the world in the comic world was Todd McFarlane for sure. And when he started off Spawn #1, who do you get to do the color on that? You got Steacy to do it. The first few covers, Steacy does the colors on those. So that guy could have picked anybody. Literally anybody in the industry would have worked with him. It would have been a huge opportunity for literally anybody, and he did choose Steacy. So he might not be a giant, like he's well regarded, maybe not the biggest name with the fans, but in terms of who other professionals respect, I guarantee they respect him. I actually got to meet him once, a long time ago, because he's from Vancouver Island in British Columbia, and I used to live in Vancouver, and so he came to conventions once in a blue moon, and I got him to sign my Astro Boy one that he did the cover for and whatever. So I have that somewhere still, I think.
The Beyond Oasis magazine art that I have now, you picked up in person at that event. Or no, you sent a friend in person to go meet him somewhere.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So yeah, so Ibrahim, that second one at the top right is also a Steacy. This is one I used to own. And so this is ad art for X-Men 2 Clone Wars for the Sega Genesis. And
I have to say that one I like a little less. I think he didn't quite get the characters on that one as well, but a lot of his work is great.
Yeah, and it's one like I no longer own, right? And this was and I don't look back with regret, right? I was like, that was a cool one, right? But selling it helped me, purchase some other things, and but I like his work. I like the airbrushing, the colors, the characters. I just remember liking the glass shards from the TV that they're breaking out of, like seeing how he painted those with a certain translucent effect to them in person was just very impressive. But I think I don't know. He didn't. It's not that he didn't do the biggest or the best box art, but like the talent is there. I would have liked to see him get other assignments, I guess, if I'm trying to like pull together a thought here.
Well, he seemed to get all the X-Men ones, which, as you say, are these group compositions that are a little tougher to deal with. Go to Mutant Apocalypse. That's nicely done. But yeah, he got these big group shot assignments.
Mutant Apocalypse is not him.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You're
Mutant
right.
Apocalypse is Judah Tversky.
Yeah, who did the Children of the Atom as well. Yeah. Game Master's Legacy is nice too if you pull that up.
Yeah, and so
it's not a great image of it, but
go. It was funny. We're gonna Ibrahim will guide you one last place. If you go all the way down toward the bottom on the right, down. It's the one with the orange background at the far right. Yep. So this is that same box that we just pulled up for the Game Gear, right? So this is probably closer to what the original looks like. And you've got just a cleaner look at the characters, a simple background. I think they all kind of pop here. I like what he did. And actually in the UK, this Games Master's Legacy Game Gear art got reused to be the box art for X-Men 2 Clone Wars. So in the US, Steacy did a new composition. In the UK for the Mega Drive release, they just reused this art and just called it, X-Men 2 Clone Wars.
Gotcha. While we're on this, I don't think they did this art any favors on the ad or on the box. Like on this ad, you've got this predominantly sort of purple image that you've stuck a red background on. Ew, like there's no contrast. You should be working with like a yellow but yellow would pick
got
up
a bunch
Wolverine.
of yellow. Yeah.
You need something black then. You need something that's not going to clash with that purple. And then on the box itself, they put this weird kind of maze background on that distracts the eye horribly. They didn't do him any favors.
No, and that was a
They should have
theme,
just
right?
had Hulk in the background, nice and big and green.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a theme for some of the Fabrys, right? Like the X-Men 2 for Genesis, the cover art. There's one that's got like there's two releases of it, right? A mega hits and the original release. The original release is like a silvery metallic thing that is just obscures what you're looking at. I think the original was kind of a painted a yellow wall that they're breaking through, but like I would love to see the original because his art almost takes a back seat to how those boxes were published for both. And Dan, who's the artist on the unpublished one that Jeremy Buzash has?
The unpublished what? Sorry.
The unpublished Clone Wars that Jeremy has.
Isn't it DeVry?
No, it's.
I can't picture the one that you're talking about.
Let me see if I can. But it's talented artist who guy did some Batman stuff. It'll come to me or it won't.
Did you want to go over who put this up as one of their favorites? Was it you, Sanford, or just discussion?
Christopher Moeller. Chris Moeller is the art.
Okay.
I think he's talented, but I didn't like the his X-Men.
I don't like the Kingpin on that one.
I don't like.
Looks a little constipated.
Well, if you all right, I what I like about that one, the one that you just had where the Kingpin looks constipated. I just like Spider-Man lends itself to good composition. He's clearly the focus. You've got the web coming down. You can see Venom and some of the enemies come in the background, but coming towards Spider-Man. Like, I don't know, the image guides your eyes, and it's a good composition. Like, I think I like Steacy.
You replace the Kingpin, and it's awesome.
Yeah, like you like if you take Steacy as a painter and let him do some of these compositions, or I think he'd do a fantastic job.
Let's talk real quick about another one that came up on the market recently. This is arcade now, and we've been talking about console here, but we'll take a quick detour to the Marvel superheroes because we haven't talked about fighting games either, which we could do real quick. But the Marvel superheroes arcade header, and you wouldn't even like you passed it. Okay, there it is. Yeah. There's the machine.
Yeah.
There's the machine, and you can see all the characters kind of around the logo. If you go about halfway down, Ibrahim, there it is. You could see the original with and without the logo, and you can see that's an Art Adams piece, who's another kind of very well regarded comic artist, purchased by a member of the group, and that was for sale on Comic Connect. So it's still up there, actually, with the asking price still up there. So I'm not divulging anything private to say that it was 25 grand was what it was listed for on Comic Connect, and that's changed hands recently. Actually, I love Adams.
I remember it as 30,000, at least on Comic Art Fans. So I was listening to a couple places at least. And,
I don't know then. Okay, something like that.
Yeah, but it's Capcom. It's Marvel. It's a big game.
It's a classic game. Classic game. People love, kind of fighting as their favorite characters, shooting off rockets as Iron Man or War Machine, or throwing your shield as Cap, or slicing and dicing as Wolverine. Like, I think that's a lot of fun for people.
Well, everyone watching, please give us a like, subscribe, and make sure you head over to our Facebook group, Original Video Game Art Collectors, to check out the community over there and see some of the art that's posted up.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Like, subscribe, and for all the reasons Ibrahim said, and if you're looking to dip your toes into buying something for the first time, we pretty much always kind of obsessively post the links to the upcoming heritage auctions, partly for ourselves, I think, to kind of keep ourselves organized, but partly for everybody else's benefit too. So come check it out.
Yeah. See everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.